The elevator numbers were dropping. 24, 21, 18. Zora Williams did not look at them directly. She didn't need to. 11 months of working the night shift in this garage had burned that elevator counter into her peripheral vision like a second heartbeat. Automatic, precise, impossible to silence. Her mop moved in slow figure eights across Bay G11's concrete floor, unhurried, steady. The perfect performance of a woman with nothing on her mind except getting through to 4 a.m. But her hands had stopped feeling the mop handle 3 minutes ago. Her body was running a completely different calculation. One nobody in this building knew she was capable of. It started with the Genesis. Dark Hyundai. Bay G13. No resident sticker. Engine cold. Nose angled 2 degrees off the parking line. The kind of angle that happens when a driver's priority isn't parking correctly. It's getting into position quickly. That car was not there at 11:15 p.m. It materialized at 11:47 p.m., and someone was sitting inside it. Lights off. Engine silent. Just waiting. She knew because the fluorescent above Bay G20 fired its 40-second flicker at 11:59 p.m., and for less than 1 full second, the light caught the tinted glass at the precise angle that made the silhouette inside shift. One movement, the size of a breath. Most people would have missed it. However, Zora Williams was not most people. She was the woman this entire building looked through like glass, and people who get looked through like glass. They learn to see everything everyone else is too comfortable to notice. Her eyes moved to the black Mercedes in Bay G14. Then they dropped. The rubber seal along the bottom edge of the rear passenger door, wet. Not damp. Wet. A thin, bright bead of moisture, visible only because she was low, and the fluorescent caught it at an angle that lasted less than a second. Someone had been inside that car. Recently. But that wasn't even the most alarming detail. Above Bay G16, the security camera, red indicator light, off. She had clocked that at 11:50 p.m. and filed it as a technical fault. She was done calling it a fault. Dead camera. Wrong car in the wrong bay. A silhouette in the dark. Moisture on a door that should have been dry. This wasn't coincidence. This was architecture. Designed piece by piece by someone who had built tonight with surgical precision. The elevator counter read 8. He was almost here. And in less than 2 seconds, he was going to make the mistake that would kill him. Before this goes 1 second further, drop in the comments right now. Did you catch it? Because while every armed man in that building missed it completely, a woman with a mop and $13 an hour just spotted the thing that was about to end a man's life. Tell me exactly what you think she saw first. Most people get it wrong. Prove you're not most people. The elevator doors opened at 12:03 a.m. No time left. None. Dae-Ho Kwon walked out the way power walks. Unhurried, deliberate, each footstep striking concrete, with the quiet authority of a man who has never needed to rush, because the world has always rearranged itself around him. His hand was already moving toward his coat pocket. Zora moved. Not ran, not flinched. Moved. In the same controlled, deliberate pace she used for everything in this garage. Because the worst thing she could do right now was look like a threat. She crossed the concrete in 6 steps, and when she opened her mouth, the single word that came out hit the air like a blade thrown from a distance. "Sir." He stopped. Hand inside his pocket. Fingers already on the fob. One press from activating everything. Both guards turned simultaneously. That instant, trained choreography, hands disappearing beneath their jackets before she finished the syllable. 2 weapons. Both pointed directly at her. Zora raised her mop handle with both hands, slowly, deliberately, not in surrender. Invisibility. This is what I'm holding. Look at it. Nothing else. I found something under your door frame. Her voice stayed flat. Certain. No tremor. 20 minutes ago. She reached into her apron pocket and extended the device fob between two fingers. Pinched like a dead insect, arm forward, toward the nearest guard. Never directly toward the principal. It was taped there. I don't know what it is. 3 seconds of absolute silence. The guard looked at the device, looked at her, looked at Daeho. Daeho had not moved a single muscle. Every man in that garage reacted. Every gun shifted. Every breath changed. He didn't. That stillness, that single, loaded, deliberate pause, was the moment power stopped performing and started calculating. This was the moment later recalled as the first fracture. The hairline crack and the certainty of a man who had never once doubted that he was the most dangerous thing in any room he entered. Then his head turned, slowly, toward the Genesis. One word in Korean. His guards were already moving, but Daeho stayed, and when his eyes came back to her, to the device between her fingers, to the pocket it came from, to the hand that had produced it without a single tremor, that was when he saw it. The detail that meant she didn't just react. She knew. Bay G13 was wrong before Zora could name it. Not loudly wrong. Not the kind of wrong that raises an alarm or makes a trained man reach for his radio. The kind that breathes quietly in the gap between what is supposed to be there and what actually is. Invisible to everyone except the one person who spent 11 months memorizing every unremarkable corner of this garage until ordinary became a language only she could read fluently. The dark Hyundai Genesis had 3 problems, and each one built harder on the last. First, no resident sticker. Every single vehicle in this private structure carried one. A small white decal, bottom right corner of the windshield, without exception. 11 months. 0 exceptions. The Genesis had clean glass. That one absence said everything. This car had never been registered to this building. It had no business being here. Second, the angle. Its nose sat 2 degrees left of the bay line. That was not a parking error. People who park are thinking about the space. People who position are thinking about a target. Something straight ahead that they are waiting to see move at exactly the right moment. Third, and this was the detail that locked everything shut, the hydraulic fluid. A thin rivulet ran from beneath the Genesis toward the center drain. Still fresh, still moving. That trail meant the car arrived within 30 minutes, engine running hot, then cut dead the instant it stopped. You only shut an engine down that fast when you are hiding heat from anyone paying attention. Now at this point, you are probably thinking those are small things. A sticker, a parking angle, a fluid trail. Individually, forgettable. Yet together, they built one undeniable truth. Tonight was engineered. The bay position, the timing, the clean windshield, not one piece of it was accidental. But the most dangerous part wasn't what those details revealed about the men inside the Genesis. It was what they revealed about how those men got through the door in the first place. This garage had cameras, access codes, restricted entry checkpoints, and someone had handed every single one of them over. The camera above Bay G16 had been dead since 11:50 p.m. Zora clocked it 13 minutes into her shift. That small red indicator light, the one that burned steady every single night without variation. Gone. Dark. The housing still mounted to the ceiling, still pointed directly at Bay G14, completely and deliberately blind. She had filed it as a technical fault and kept moving. That was the last charitable explanation she was giving it. Because a technical fault does not go dark at 11:50 p.m., exactly 14 minutes before a man parks his car in that exact bay, and stay silent while armed men sit waiting 40 feet away. Technical faults do not have timing. Plans do. Someone killed that camera on purpose. Not a maintenance crew. Not a system error. A person. With an access code, with building knowledge, with precise awareness of which camera covered G14, had made sure that eye went blind before the Genesis ever entered the ramp. And that was the moment this became something else entirely. Zora was not a witness to a situation that was developing. She was standing inside an operation that was already active, already timed, and already running toward a single, specific outcome. The men who built tonight had been thorough enough to neutralize the one camera that could expose them, which meant they were also thorough enough to handle any other variable that surfaced, including a night cleaner who noticed too much. However, that was their miscalculation, not hers. They had planned for cameras, guards, and locked access points. They had not planned for a woman in a gray vest who had spent 11 months learning this garage the way most people never learn anything, by being invisible long enough to see everything. She had 30 seconds, and she already knew exactly what to do. 3 weeks ago, Zora found a key fob on the floor near Bay G14. She picked it up, dropped it in her cart's lost and found tray, told herself she'd hand it to building admin by the end of the week. She never did, and for 3 weeks she hadn't been able to explain why. It wasn't negligence. Zora Williams did not do negligence. Everything she touched in this garage had a system, a timeline, a place. Yet that key fob stayed in her apron pocket, shift after shift, week after week, silent and patient, like it was waiting for a specific night to become useful. That night was right now. She moved her cart alongside the black Mercedes in Bay G14, pulled the microfiber cloth from her pocket, and began wiping down the boot panel. Slow, professional strokes. This was the second of the month. Executive vehicles got exterior wipes on the first. One day off was close enough to unremarkable that no one watching would question it. And someone was absolutely watching. She felt that gaze pressing into her back from the Genesis like a physical hand. She didn't react. She kept wiping, working her way up the rear panel toward the driver's side door. And when she reached the handle, her left hand dipped into her pocket and pressed the 3-week-old fob once. Short, silent. The tiny LED on its face blinked green. Still paired to this vehicle. The owner had never reported it missing. She had turned that detail over in her mind many times across 3 weeks, without fully understanding why it bothered her. She understood now. A man who loses a key to his own car and never reports it. That key was not lost. It was placed. Left deliberately by someone building access they were never supposed to have. But that wasn't even the most alarming part. As her fingers ran beneath the doorframe, low, natural, nothing more than a woman wiping a panel, she felt it. Cold, slightly wet, one edge carrying the sticky ghost adhesive, the kind left behind when something has been taped in place and worked itself free. A second fob, except it was not a key. The weight was wrong, too balanced, too flat. Its edges were machined smooth in a way no car manufacturer produces. She had seen one before, in a documentary she watched on a sleepless night, the kind of night that sends you somewhere dark on the internet without meaning to. A device fob. Remote detonation. Ignition synced. When the real key came within proximity range and the engine turned over, it would complete a circuit. and whatever was packed into the undercarriage of that Mercedes would activate instantly. This car was not a car. It was a tomb on 4 wheels, parked in the exact bay, on the exact night, waiting for the exact man who was now descending in an elevator 4 floors above her head. Zora palmed the device, slid the original spare fob under the biohazard bag on her cart, pushed to bay G12, started mopping. Her hands did not shake once. Hold on. She just pulled a live detonation device from under a car door with her bare hands. No gloves, no backup, no weapon. And then walked back to her mop like she didn't just cheat death for a man who has never once looked at her. And you're telling me you're going to watch this and not say a single word? Drop in the comments right now. What would you have done in her position? Because most people would have dropped that device and run. She didn't. And I need to know if you understand why. Comment below. I'm reading every single one. At this point, you're probably asking yourself the one question that changes everything about this story. Why didn't she just leave? She had the device. She had identified the threat. The elevator was at floor 8 and dropping. Every reasonable exit from that garage was open to her. The service ramp, the maintenance stairwell, the staff corridor behind bay G7. She had options. She had time. She had every justification in the world to put that device on the floor, walk out, and let whatever was going to happen, happen. Instead, she went back to mopping. And that decision, that single, quiet, completely unreasonable decision to stay, was the moment this story became something that could not be undone. Because Zora Williams understood something that none of the men in that garage, not the ones in the Genesis, and not the ones descending in the elevator, had calculated into their plan. The device was gone from the doorframe, but the real key was still on his body. The moment Deho pressed that fob, the circuit would search for the device, and when it found nothing, the detonation would fail. The men in the Genesis would know immediately. They would see him reach the car, see it fail to ignite, and they would not wait to find out why. A failed hit does not end a threat. It accelerates it. The only way to stop what was coming was to stop him before he pressed the fob at all. She had one move. One word. One window of roughly 4 seconds between the elevator doors opening and his hand completing its reach into his coat pocket. However, the real weight of the decision was not about timing. It was about what happened after. Because the instant she opened her mouth, she stopped being invisible. 11 months of being nobody in this building, erased in one syllable. She was about to become the most visible person in that garage. The elevator hit floor 2. She made her choice. He was 3 steps from the door handle. 2. Zora moved. Not fast. Not dramatic. 6 measured steps across the concrete, cart beside her, cloth still in hand. The complete picture of a woman doing exactly what she was paid to do. Nothing about her movement said threat. Nothing about it said urgent. Yet every single thing about it was both. His hand was already inside his coat pocket. She opened her mouth. Sir. 1 syllable. Flat. Certain. No more force than necessary. And yet it landed in that concrete space like a stone dropped through still water. The ripple was immediate. He stopped. Both guards turned on her in the same breath. Trained, synchronized, lethal. Their hands disappeared beneath their jackets before she finished the word. 2 weapons, aimed directly at her chest. Zora raised her mop handle with both hands, slowly, deliberately. Not surrender. Visibility. This is what I'm holding. See it clearly. I found something under your doorframe. She reached into her apron pocket and extended the device fob between 2 fingers, pinched, arm forward, directed at the nearest guard. Never at Daeho. Protocol mattered here. Every detail of this moment had to read as professional, or it would read as suspicious. It was taped there, 20 minutes ago. The guard stared at the device, then at her, then at Daeho. Every man in that garage reacted, except one. Daeho Kwon stood completely still, hand still inside his pocket, face completely unreadable. And the stillness of that single man, surrounded by drawn weapons and held breath, was more terrifying than every gun in the room combined. Then his head turned, slowly, toward the Genesis. He said one word in Korean, and the garage exploded into motion. What happened near the Genesis took 40 seconds. Zora did not watch a single moment of it. She pushed her car to the service column at the far end of the garage, put her back against the concrete pillar, and looked at the drain in the floor. She counted her own heartbeats the way a person counts something reliable when everything around them stops being reliable. 51, 52, 53. The sounds behind her built and broke. Shouting in Korean, movement, something heavy against concrete. Then a single sharp sound she was not going to name. And then silence fell back into the garage, like a curtain dropping over a stage. 40 seconds, start to finish. That was how long it took for Daeho Kwon's men to handle what two armed professionals had spent the better part of an hour positioning for. But that wasn't the part that mattered. What mattered was what happened when the silence arrived. Footsteps. Even. Unhurried. Coming directly toward her. She looked up. Daeho was 5 feet away. Coat undisturbed. Expression carrying nothing readable. Behind him, his guards worked the scene with the quiet, practiced efficiency of men who had done this before and would do it again without requiring discussion. He didn't look at any of it. He looked at her, and the way he looked at her had completely changed. 2 minutes ago, she was furniture, a gray vest and a mop handle that existed somewhere beneath his line of sight. Now she was the only thing in the garage worth looking at. He was running a calculation she couldn't fully see yet. However, one thing was already certain. Whatever answer he was building toward, Zora Williams was the center of it. And the question hadn't even started yet. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't thank her. Didn't acknowledge the 2 weapons that had just been aimed at her chest. Didn't offer a single word of relief or recognition for what she had done. Instead, Daeho Kwon looked at Zora Williams the way a man looks at something he cannot yet categorize. With the cold, precise attention of someone taking inventory before making a decision that cannot be reversed. His eyes moved from her face to her hands to her cart, then back to her face. One full, clinical sweep that missed absolutely nothing. "You found it 20 minutes ago," he said. His English was exact, each word placed deliberately, like currency counted before it changes hands. "Yes, sir." "And you waited?" Not a question. She answered it anyway. I needed to be sure of what it was before I said anything. "In 20 minutes, he said slowly. "You had every option available. You could have left the garage, reached security, called anyone." He tilted his head one fraction. "You stayed. I work here until 4 a.m. That is not what I asked." She held his gaze. "I know." The silence between them was not empty. It was packed dense with everything he was calculating and everything she was choosing not to hand him. This was the interrogation that looked like a conversation, the kind that powerful men conduct in calm voices because they have never needed to raise them. "How did you identify the fob as the specific threat?" He let the question sit. Not the Genesis, not the car itself, the fob. "I didn't identify it," she said. I made the best decision available in the time I had. And if you were wrong? Then you drive your car, and I hand a piece of trash to your security team for nothing. She paused. I've handed stranger things to your guards before. They never remember me afterward. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth. The recalibration of a scope. The precise mechanical adjustment of a man who just realized his target is positioned differently than his sight was set for. The camera above G16, he said. Indicator light off. Yes. You noticed. At 11:50 p.m. She didn't look away. I noticed all the lights. He was quiet for a long moment. And that silence. That particular, loaded, calculating silence was the moment this stopped being a conversation about a device fob in a parking garage. This was now something else entirely. She just stood in front of the most dangerous man in that building. No weapon, no backup, no protection, and answered every single one of his questions without flinching once. Not once. And you're watching this on a channel you haven't subscribed to yet? That means the next time a story like this drops, you miss it completely. The algorithm will not send it to you. You will never know what happens next. Hit subscribe right now. Because this story is about to go somewhere that will genuinely shock you, and you need to be here when it does. The real question came quietly. Not the one about the fob, not the one about the camera light, or the 20-minute window, or why she stayed. Those were the surface questions. The ones designed to measure how she answered, not what she knew. The real question arrived after a pause so deliberate it had architecture. The key fob you found 3 weeks ago, Deho said. Zora held completely still. You found it near Bay G14. You did not hand it to building administration. You did not hand it to my security team. His voice carried no accusation, which made it more dangerous than accusation. You kept it, for 3 weeks, in your pocket. She said nothing. Why? I kept meaning to hand it in. His eyes didn't change. You are not a person who forgets things, Ms. Williams. We have just established that, rather thoroughly. And there it was. The question underneath every question he had asked since walking off that elevator. Not whether she was a threat. Not whether she was innocent. But whether she was something far more specific and far more unsettling. Whether she had known. Someone on my inside security rotation disabled that camera tonight, he said. It was not a system fault. The access code was entered manually at 11:31 p.m. by someone who has worked in this building for over 2 years. He paused. That person knew my schedule, my bay, my Tuesday routine. The temperature of the garage shifted. They built tonight around information that only existed inside my own organization, he said, which means the ambush was not the most dangerous part of what happened here. He let that land fully before continuing. The most dangerous part is that someone I trusted handed them the door. Zora understood exactly what he was not saying. A betrayal that specific, that precise, that deeply embedded, did not come from outside. It grew from the inside, slowly, patiently, in a place where trust had made everyone comfortable enough to stop looking. However, what he said next was the detail that changed everything. You noticed the camera at 11:50 p.m., he said. The access code was entered at 11:31 p.m. He let the math sit between them like a loaded object on a table. 19 minutes apart, he said quietly. You were already in this garage when it happened. The guard's voice was flat, clinical. The voice of a man delivering measurements, not opinions. C4 composite, packed into the rear quarter panel. Remote detonation via ignition sync. Nobody moved. When the real key reached proximity range and the ignition engaged, he paused, the way people pause when the next words carry physical weight. The circuit would complete automatically. Dae-ho said one word. Radius. 4 meters. Guaranteed structural elimination. Everything within that distance. The guard stopped. He didn't need to finish. 4 meters. Dae-ho's 2 guards flanked him at roughly 2 meters each. His standard exit path from elevator to car put him at the driver's door in 11 steps. The blast was not designed to look like an accident. It was designed to look like a statement. The kind that leaves no survivors and no questions about who sent it. This was not an ambush. This was an execution, engineered down to the last meter. And at this point, you need to fully understand what that means for Zora Williams, because she had been standing at Bay G12 when that device was still live, 8 meters from the car, 4 meters outside the radius, close enough to hear the ignition, far enough to survive it. That distance was not a coincidence. However, nobody in that garage was ready for what the guard said next. He turned the phone screen toward Dae-ho. Forensic imaging from a working camera on the upper level, time-stamped 11:32 p.m., showing a figure in a maintenance uniform crouched at the G16 camera housing. The figure's face was angled away, deliberately. But the build, the shoes, the specific way the left shoulder sat higher than the right. Dae-ho recognized it immediately. And the recognition did not look like shock. It looked like the quiet, devastating confirmation of something he had been refusing to believe for weeks. The name came out of Dae-ho's mouth like a verdict. Sung-jin. One word. No raised voice. No visible anger. Just the flat, irrevocable sound of a door closing permanently on 9 years of loyalty that had turned out to be a performance. His lead guard's jaw tightened once. A single involuntary muscle contraction, and then went completely still. That small reaction said everything. The guard had known Sung-jin, trusted him, worked beside him through years of operations that required the kind of proximity where you either become brothers or you become dangerous to each other. Turns out, Sung-jin had chosen a third option entirely. Find him, Dae-ho said. The guard was already moving. But that wasn't even the part that should have been most alarming. What should have stopped everyone in that garage cold was the specific access Sung-jin had used. Not brute force, not a stolen card or a copied code. He had used his own legitimate credentials. The ones granted 6 months ago when Dae-ho promoted him and expanded his clearance to include building systems, scheduling architecture, and security rotation logs. 6 months. That was how long this had been building inside the organization. Patient, invisible, feeding information outward in pieces small enough that no single piece looked like betrayal. The Genesis didn't arrive in that garage by accident. It arrived because someone with a chair at the table had spent half a year drawing a map and handing it to the right people. And not one person with a weapon, a title, or a clearance level had seen it coming. Except the woman with the mop. Zora said nothing. She had heard the name. She had seen enough of that phone screen to understand the shape of the betrayal without needing the details filled in. However, her mind was already moving past the identity of the leak, to the detail that had been sitting in the back of her thoughts since the guard first said ignition sync. The device had been positioned to slip free, not to stay, to slip, as if someone had placed it knowing it would be found, and timed the entire operation around the assumption that it wouldn't be found by the right person. That calculation had just cost them everything. He asked it once. No build-up, no warning. Just the question, placed directly in front of her, like something sharp set on a table between two people who both understand what it means. Did someone send you here tonight? The garage went completely quiet. Not the natural quiet of an empty concrete structure at midnight. The specific, Pressurized quiet that forms when a powerful man asks the one question that determines whether the person standing in front of him walks out or doesn't. Zora looked at him steadily. No. One word. No elaboration. No defense layered on top of it to make it sound more convincing. Because innocent people who over-explain are the first ones a man like Deho stops believing. He studied her face for 7 full seconds. 7 seconds is longer than it sounds when someone with his resources and his history is using every one of them to read you. You noticed the Genesis the moment it arrived, he said. You identified the dead camera 13 minutes into your shift. You located the device, removed it, and repositioned yourself at exactly 8 meters from the blast radius before I stepped off that elevator. He paused. That is not a sequence of reactions. That is sequence of decisions. It is, she said. They were mine. People who make decisions that precise, he said, have usually made them before. And there it was. The real accusation underneath every question he had asked since the elevator doors opened. Not that she was sent. Not that she was planted. Something far more unsettling and far harder to disprove. That she was ready. At this point, you're probably thinking she should explain herself. Give him the full picture. Lay out every detail of what she noticed, and when and why. That is exactly what a person does when they need someone to trust them. However, Zora Williams did not need Dae-Ho Kwon to trust her. She needed him to be alive. Those two things were not the same, and she had understood the difference from the moment she palmed that device. I pay attention, she said. I have been paying attention in this garage for 11 months. Nobody ever told me to stop. He held her gaze for a long moment. No, he said quietly. They didn't. But what he said next was the statement that reframed everything that had happened that night. The detail that turned a story about an ambush into something with much deeper roots and a much longer timeline. The spare key fob you found 3 weeks ago, he said. It belonged to Sung Jin. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the garage. Sung Jin had lost that key fob 3 weeks ago in Bay G14. Not lost it. Dropped it. During what the building access logs would later confirm was an unauthorized visit to the 4th sublevel at 1:17 a.m. on a Thursday, 11 days before he used his credentials to disable the G16 camera and open the garage to the men in the Genesis. He had been running reconnaissance, measuring timing, testing the layout. And on the way out, the key fob slipped from his pocket without him noticing. The one person in the building who worked that level at 1 a.m. found it the following morning and kept it. Not because she knew what it was, not because she suspected Sung Jin of anything on the night she picked it up, but because 11 months of working a building full of powerful men had built in her a specific, instinctive resistance to discarding things before she understood what they were. That instinct had just saved Dae-Ho Kwon's life and dismantled a 9-year betrayal in the same motion. Dae-Ho reached into the inner pocket of his overcoat. His hand emerged with a matte black card. No logo, no title, edges sharp. And he set it on the edge of her cart, not handed, placed, with the deliberate precision of a man who understands the difference between giving someone something and making it available to them. When you need it, he said, that number reaches me directly. Zora looked at the card. You'll want to think carefully about what it means. Handing a direct line to a night cleaner. I have been thinking carefully, he said, since you said the word, sir, and my hand was already on that door. She picked up the card. She put it in her apron pocket, the same pocket that had carried a spare key fob for 3 weeks without knowing why. No thank you. No ceremony. No moment designed for memory. However, this was the moment that would define everything that followed. Not the swap, Not the one word that stopped him at the door. This quiet exchange in a concrete garage at 12:31 a.m. A card placed on a cart between two people the world had never once considered equally. This was where the real story began. She walked out of Cheongsu Tower at exactly 4 a.m. Same time as every other night. Same gray vest folded under her arm. Same unhurried pace through the lobby, past the front desk attendant who did not look up, through the glass doors and into the wet Seoul pre-dawn. A city that smelled like rain that had already happened, and traffic that hadn't started yet. Nothing about her exit looked different. That was the point. Behind her, the fourth sublevel of that parking garage held a disarmed bomb, 2 detained men, a dismantled 9-year betrayal, and a black Mercedes that would never run its original plates again. A full security operation was already rewriting the access logs, pulling the footage, and building the kind of quiet, thorough response that powerful men deploy when they want a problem resolved without becoming a headline. Zora Williams was not part of that operation. Yet she had started it with one word and a key fob she kept in her pocket for 3 weeks. Her phone buzzed at 4:08 a.m. Unknown number. No message. Just a single period. She looked at it for 2 full seconds. Then she put her phone back in her pocket and kept walking. He was already testing the line, already confirming the connection, already treating the number on that card as active infrastructure rather than a courtesy gesture. Because men like Dae-ho Kwon do not make courtesy gestures. Every move he made was architectural, and he had just confirmed that Zora Williams was now a permanent part of his architecture. But here is what nobody in that building understood yet. Not Dae-ho. Not his guards. Not the men who built that ambush from the inside. Zora Williams had not spent 11 months memorizing that garage because she was thorough. She had spent 11 months memorizing it because she was waiting. Not for the ambush. Not for Dae-ho specifically. For the moment when everything she had quietly, patiently, invisibly learned became impossible to ignore. That moment arrived tonight. And it did not end in that garage. It started there. She walked out of that building the same way she walked in. Quiet, unhurried, invisible to everyone who passed her. But she is not the same person who clocked in at 11 p.m. And neither is he. A woman nobody looked at twice just became the most important person in the life of the most dangerous man in that building. And you have absolutely no idea what she does next. Neither does he. Subscribe to this channel right now, because this story is not over. It just changed shape. And the next part will make everything you just watched feel like the calm before something you were not prepared for. Subscribe. You need to be here for what comes next.